Hey, this is Lee Balcom. One of the things that many people tell me is they don't know how to get to intimacy. They really want to have an intimate marriage and they don't know how. And so today, what I want to do is talk about the path to intimacy. So let me give you a little background so you know where this kind of comes from. Years ago, when I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity of being involved in a project about community building. Now, this is a project that was put together by Scott Peck. Scotty was at the end of his career. He'd already written this bestseller, The Road Less Traveled, which is a great book. But then he kind of shifted gears in a way that maybe we didn't see because the whole thing about the road less traveled is you finding your way through the spiritual path of life, of what that might be for you. And then he comes back and he talks about in the book, The Different Drum, about how you get to community. This is the collection of people coming together where they are sharing in vulnerability and sharing in an inclusive world where this group is inclusive of each other and understanding of each other, compassionate for each other. And part of what he did is he created this foundation, the Foundation for Community Encouragement, which doesn't seem to be overly active these days, but back then, and this would have been in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s when I was involved, they had these programs all around the country where the idea was for you to come together and build community. And even in his book, Peck talks about the fact that whenever two people are coming together, two or more people are coming together, they have to find a way of building this connection, right? This place of how they're going to involve themselves with each other. And he said that there is a path through this. So that path is something that I adopted into my idea of how a couple can get to intimacy. And here is my kind of understanding. Community, larger group, right? Intimacy, as I'm defining it, is between two people, this intimacy in a marriage. And Peck talked about the fact that part of what was behind that was a vulnerability with each other. There's also a commitment. Does this sound familiar? There's a commitment of that relationship that they're going to hang through things. There's also a level of acceptance of who the other person is. Is this kind of ringing some bells of where we're going, of support for each other, unconditional support of each other, and how we come together as a team. Now, it's very different when, for instance, I would go to one of these events and there were a bunch of strangers, like 100 strangers in this room together, trying to find our way over the course of a weekend to community, knowing that at the end of that, we were going to go our separate ways. And the idea was not that that was an end all and be all, right? It wasn't that you walked away going, I got what it's not like getting a gold medal. I got there, I got to community, as much as to understand what it felt like to get there. And if you could understand the felt like part, then you could take that back into the organizations that you're a part of. That was kind of his plan. Learn there, take it back. Now, along the way, I learned how to use that process with other groups that were more permanent groups. So I worked with religious organizations, some nonprofits, and some other groups in order for them to understand why they were stuck in this process and how to move along. So I got pretty good at the process, and I realized one day, ding, ding, that this is the same process, that two people come together, but more importantly, because in a marriage, what you're saying is we're in this for life. This is how to get to intimacy that lasts. That's what we want to talk about, with how this process gets us to intimacy that lasts. So these two people become this team together. And one of the things that I realized is when a group could really, truly get to community, man, they were unstoppable in what they were capable of doing because the infighting was gone, the difficulties were gone. It's not that there was no conflict. They just understood that there was a path through the conflict to get to something different. In fact, the path goes right through conflict. That's how you have to get there. So in Stoicism, we often have this idea of the obstacle is the way, right? That's the idea that the obstacle that one day blocked you becomes the way to get to where you want to get to. And guess what? That applies here, because in a marriage, whatever is in your way is probably something that you actually have to get through. And instead of it being in your way, it becomes the way. It becomes how you move through there. So if you find yourself stuck in conflict, guess what? That's going to get us there. So let's talk about these 4 different stages on the way to intimacy. Now, Scotty used this idea on the way to community, and I want to use this on the way to intimacy because it fits exactly the same way. So I'm just changing the terminology a little bit and explaining it in terms of 2 people who are married, okay? All right, so let's start with the first place that we all have to start. The first place that we all have to start is pseudo intimacy. Peck talked about it as pseudo community. Pseudo intimacy is the place where you're getting to know each other and you're finding all the places where you're alike. And you end up thinking, gosh, we are so alike. Now, I want you to think back on relationships that maybe it's close friendships, even with your spouse, in larger groups, whatever, where you spend that whole time, trying to figure out how you're connected. Just this morning, I was meeting with somebody for the first time, kind of building out my network and support group in this new place I am. And I say new, it's been two years, so it's only so new, but I still keep adding people into my support group, right? My network. And so as we sat down, what do you do? That's the question. What do you do? Where are you from? How'd you get here? And what are you looking for? Common threads. I talked about where I was from. Turned out there was an affinity there, a connection there, right? And so we kept finding these ways that we had similarities. Now, what also kind of came out of that is some differences of philosophy, but that's okay. I mean, that I have plenty of room for that. In fact, it's necessary even in this process to get there. But I want to go back to you and your spouse, because I remember it very well with me and my spouse. You meet up, right? And you are interested enough that you establish some conversation and you start looking for the links. So when, not my wife then, but this person that I was attracted to and wanted to get to know better, as we're talking, we found out that we kind of went on vacation to the same place at the beach, and even figured out that we were probably within, I don't know, a few yards of each other a couple of summers earlier at the exact same beach. And so you're going, oh wow, we were actually at the same place. Oh, that's so alike, right? And our parents had similar career paths, so we could talk about how similar that was growing up, and we could talk about all these different ways that we had very similar lives, and get to the place where you go, wow, we're so similar, right? We're so alike. And that's the first stage. Now, sometimes people get thrown off a little bit because that pseudo intimacy, like they think it's fake, right? There's nothing to it. It's not that. It is a necessary step. And I want to be clear about this as we go through all 4 steps. They are necessary steps. You can't jump them, right? You have to go through them. Now, how long you stay in them, that's a choice. There's some options along the way that can really get you stuck in the stages that aren't particularly helpful. And so we want to talk about the path, but this first stage, pseudo intimacy, is a necessary stage. When I went to Scotty's events, same thing. You get there and you're talking to these people and, oh, where are you from? How'd you get here? Why are you involved in this? And, oh, we're so alike in this, right? And then that is the piece that builds the willingness to go through to the next stage. So this is a necessary piece in any place of development of a group and of a couple. So at the point when you're in pseudo intimacy, it's not that you've already committed to life. I want to be clear about that. This is something that starts at the beginning of a relationship. And sometimes you go back to it because it feels a little safer than some other pieces of this. Some couples never get out of this. And some couples, when they start to get out of it, break apart. So I want to name these as the stages you have to go through in order to get to real intimacy, which is kind of the goal. But you don't have to go through it. Many people don't make it through. Many people bail because they don't understand it. And that's why I want to talk about it. Pseudo intimacy is easy to talk about. It's like, oh, you get to know each other and you're like, oh, we like the same kind of foods. Oh, we have the same kind of backgrounds. Oh, we have the same values. Oh, we have some of the same friends or same sports or same hobbies or same interest or whatever it is, right? We're looking for we are so alike. And when we, as humans, have this thing where we're so alike, that forms that first piece of including them in our little world. So, pseudo-intimacy, stage number 1. Stage number 2 is the one where things get a little rough. And that's chaos. Now, chaos can be openly argumentative, fighting. It can be also quiet, tug-of-war, undercurrents, and it all kind of depends on the personalities at play. If you tend to be a loud, boisterous, out kind of person, it's probably going to be a loud process through that. If you tend to be more quiet and understated, it may be a little less loud, but you got to go through it. Chaos is the stage when something happens and you go, oh, wait, we're not alike. And as soon as that illusion of sameness is broken, you realize you really aren't alike. You really don't see things straight on. You're not eye to eye on things. And some of the things you thought you were exactly on the same page, you might be in the same chapter, but you might be somewhere else in the book or even in a separate book, right? So this is where you realize you're not on the same page. And at this point, that feels wrong. And so if the first stage of pseudo-intimacy is all about the belief that we are so alike, chaos is the feeling of we are nothing alike. The more we talk, the less we seem to have in common. And you begin to go, how do I get back to that old person? How do I find that person where we are just alike? And so sometimes this happens really fast in a relationship. It's that place where you're talking about, oh, we like this kind of food. And the other person goes, I really don't like that kind of food. Now, I've seen a lot of people who've gotten into relationships where somebody wants to be in that relationship badly enough that they're like, no, I like that kind of food. Yeah, I'll eat it. Yeah, I like that kind of movie. I had a friend of mine whose spouse clearly did not, just from the outside watching, clearly did not like what this person loved, but pretended to. And that fell apart after a while because you can only pretend to do something that took a whole lot of resources and some fear and involvement. And suddenly that kind of began to break the facade. And that's great. You know why? You don't want to be stuck in pseudo-intimacy. It's not intimacy. And so part of the process is getting past that. So chaos is about trying to get the person back to where you thought they were, which is not where they ever were. And guess what they're doing? The exact same thing. So if pseudo-intimacy is we are so alike, then chaos is we are nothing alike. And that process can be very difficult because the background of we are nothing alike is, but I got to get you back to where you really are, right? It's kind of that, gosh, there's some things that, you seem very different from me, but let's see if I can get you back to where we need to be, to where we are back to being just alike, which, by the way, was not true, right? So understand that part of what's going on is we're trying to get back to what felt like a safer place. If you feel like we are just alike, we're moving in sync, right? We are lockstep together, that can feel safe. It's just not true. So chaos is the point when you go, we are nothing alike. And if you stay through the chaos long enough, you calm down enough to get to the next stage. And this is the hard one. It's emptiness. Emptiness is the feeling of going, man, we are nothing alike and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be a part of this relationship because we're nothing alike. Now, it's still judging the relationship by how much we are alike instead of how much we like our connection and how much we're willing to be a part of that in order to bring our lives together. That's the danger point of this, because emptiness is that place. And if you've ever been through this with an organization or with a person, you just go, oh, there's no energy here. Right? I just feel like walking away because we're nothing alike and I have no idea what to do about that. So at these events, what we would do at these community building events is we would start out by just kind of sitting in a circle and people would take turns sharing and everybody would do it. I mean, I could watch them trying to find the connection with each other. And over time, it began to be a sense of who we are until somebody says, I'm not that. I'm not that. And then suddenly everything begins to break apart when somebody else says, I'm not that either. And somebody else says, I'm not that either. It begins to cascade and people begin to fight with each other, trying to get back to an understanding we had of who we were that was never true. And that leaves you at a place of going, what do we do? You're not what I thought. Two people who believed they found intimacy have been fighting long enough to get through the chaos to sit together and go, what do we do here? This feels so empty. If you sit through the emptiness long enough, knowing that that is the way to get to something else, you make it through to intimacy. And intimacy is, we're nothing alike. And that's kind of cool. We're nothing alike and we don't need to be. We don't have to be. We're nothing alike and we still choose to stand together in this, to support each other, to be vulnerable with each other, to be committed to each other, to continue this process of walking forward. Now, I will tell you, one of the downfalls of the way the organization did these events is after it was over, it was over. We pack up our bags and leave, having gotten to community. And guess what? Whatever length of time the events were, it's how long it took us to get to community. And there are still some people who at the end were like, I wasn't there. And part of a true community is able to go, that's okay. We still have you. We still include you. We'll wait for you. In a partnership, waiting that out in a marriage means that you're getting to the place where you go, you know what? We're not alike. We don't need to be. That's great. That's cool. We can be supportive of each other. We're in this together. We're going to now bring our best selves to move forward together, to be a part of each other. That's intimacy. We're vulnerable with each other. We support each other. We see each other as a team. We allow for our differences, and we allow that in the process of finding our way forward. That's intimacy. And the only way you can get there is by walking through the stages. Yes, you have to start at pseudo intimacy. There's no other way around. That's how you get together. That's how you build the connections to get there. So don't fault yourself for having been through that. That's where every relationship starts. It's just not where you want to stay. But to be honest, you also don't want to stay in chaos where you're fighting about that. You don't want to stay in emptiness because that just feels so hollow and hurtful. And here's the thing. Most divorces happen either in the later stages of chaos where you're just like, I'm tired of the fighting, or in the midst of emptiness where you're like, there's nothing here. And you're one step from true intimacy. You're one shift from true intimacy. You're almost there, but you don't know it because you keep thinking back to who the person was that you thought they were when you were in the pseudo intimacy, and they did too. And so part of the process is you have to walk through these stages knowing that the only way to get to intimacy is to walk through that, to struggle through that, and then to get to the other side. Can you stay stuck in that, either the places of chaos or emptiness? I've seen it many times. Chaos, you just keep trying to change each other. Emptiness, you just sit there and moan and still choose to stay at a distance. Or you can say, we've got to find a way through. We've got to find a way through. so we can stay together, so we can stand together, so we can share our lives together, so we can find true intimacy by truly accepting each other. Second warning. Sometimes you drop back. At different stages in life, you will go, oh, we had intimacy, and now we've dropped back because, once again, I fooled myself into thinking that we are just alike. Now we're going to have to go through chaos and emptiness again. But here is the third thing. After you've done it a few times, you know the path. You know how you can get there. You just have to stick it out. If you do not have the tools to stick it out, that's when you need to come visit me. You can find me at savethemarriage.com. That's savethemarriage.com. This is Lee Balcom, and I'm pulling for you as you work to find true intimacy in your relationship. I wish you the best as you continue to work to save your marriage.